Actually, we should always read the translation. We weren't doing that. So, for my dear Lord Gauranga, please show your mercy to this lowly and destitute soul. Oh Lord, there is no one more fallen than myself in all the three worlds. Holding grass between my teeth, O Lord Kora, I am calling out to you now. Please become compassionate upon me and reside in the temple of my heart. If you do not give your mercy, seeing how fallen I am, then why are you known as Petit Pavana, the merciful savior of the fallen? I am plunged amidst the violent, hurricane-stricken waves in the ocean of this material world, from which there is no escape. Kindly give me the gift of your divine lotus feet, which are compared to a boat in which your servant may cross the ocean of birth and death. Narottam Das, the servant of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu, ceaselessly makes this prayer. Okay, so we'll do the next verse, which is verse 3, and it's the last class, so we'll also finish this story, and maybe I really even haven't finished the last story, and we'll all put it all in context, and we'll take the retreat home, and I probably need a drum roll to accomplish all that, and welcome my Sunday Sanga. I have an online class at this time every Sunday and every Wednesday. So we have a nice group, maybe for 12 years or more. And including one of the original members is here, Gail. Gail had listened to, this was even 10 years ago, had listened to and come to so many of my classes and asked thousands and upon thousands and upon thousands of questions. I'm a creative speaker, so I apply philosophy and sometimes a creative idea. And my forte is I like everything to be logical. But if I skip a hair of logic, and I know practically I'm the only one who knows that I just jumped this little far. And then I ask questions and it's Gail and she says, what about this? So one time at my birthday, there was a comedy routine. There were professional comedians. And they did this comedy routine where people where they set it up so the answer is given and the audience has to give the questions. So the first one was, you're not the body. And someone buzzed, what has Michael Jackson realized? Then the next one was, a place where devotees congregate to glorify the holy name. What are the airports? Then devotional markings all over your body to indicate you're a devotee of the Lord. What are tattoos? And then 108. And the rhyme was, how many more questions does Gail have to ask Dhanurdhara Swami before he wishes she had become a Catholic instead of a devotee? He's married to a Catholic. So.
Birthday wish?
What? So nice to see you here, Gail, live.
Nice. Even better to be here.
Okay. So, reading from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Canto 10, Chapter 46, Text 4. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Man-manaskā mat-prāṇā, mad-arthe, tyakta-daihikāḥ. Mameva dayitaṁ preṣṭham, ātmānaṁ manasā gatāḥ. Tyakta-loka-dharmāś, mad-arthe tat bibharmy aham. The minds of those gopīs, this is Krishna speaking to Uddhava, because you remember, he's giving it a message, and he chose Uddhava because Uddhava had these qualities, because this was the most confidential message. Krishna is giving his heart, and he wants to share it with someone, and he needs a messenger to do that, who is able to not only share it, you'll see at the end of the story, he not only shares the message, but he pacifies them, and he actually stays in Vrindavan to relieve their suffering. And then Uddhava is actually going to all the different holy places and saying to the gopīs, and what happened here, and what happened here, and what happened here. And then also explaining Soma, because he's Bodhisattva, he's the supremely intelligent person, and he's Sishya, Brihaspati Shakshat, the direct disciple of the guru of the demigods. And he's Sakha Dayata Krishnasya. He's the most beloved friend of Krishna. And he is Rishinam Pravara Mantri advisor. Shri Govind, you're a good mantri. You're a good mantri, you're a good advisor. So Krishna picks him to deliver this confidential message because of all of Dwarka. He's Pravaha Mantri, the top mantra, counselor, advisor, wisdom person. And he's this close devotee. And now he's telling, who he's giving the message to. Because communication doesn't just mean speaking the truth, it means having the truth understood. And to have the truth understood, you have to understand what is the language of your audience. And I'm not just talking whether it's French or German or English or Hindi or Bengali. In the same language, people understand words in different ways. One time I was giving a class, and it was about surrender. And I was trying to explain that it's not going to be well translated into English. And then there was this one person who always come to my class. A very wonderful person, Satya Hari. And he was one of the first disciples of Yogi Bhajan, but also initiated Gaudiya Vaishnava. And he was also quite learned. And he said that his teacher says that, it's hard to translate words because words get impregnated with the history of their use. So communication is Prabhupada actually said something about communication that's really pertinent. He said that communication means realization, and realization means a depth of understanding, because what communication entails is taking a message and then not repeating it exactly as perhaps you heard and understood it, but changing the form to accommodate the language or psychology or frame of reference of the audience without losing the meaning. And if you don't have that depth of understanding, you'll change the meaning. You'll do one or two things. You'll keep it in the same form, even though no one else can understand what that means, or you'll change the form and lose the meaning. So now Krishna said, I'm giving you this message, but he wants to say why he's giving this message and who's he giving this message to. And Om Jnana Timirandasya Yananjana Shavakaya Chaksu Vimalatam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Katamayam Dadati Sa Pratantikam Vanshakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasade Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. So I don't have much time and I have a lot to put in. So I have to think very carefully how to really give the essence. But just to bring it back to the context, I had two stories. And I picked the stories because they have something very similar about them. And what's similar about both the stories is they're probably the best stories in the Bhagavatam that indicate the highest level of love and therefore the highest level of consciousness. And we went to that story of Ramananda Roy. We really didn't get to summarize it in a way, but when he asked that question, give a verse to explain the ultimate truth, he really wanted the topmost expression of love and reality. And it's an incredible story he was rejecting verses that normally we would revere. He gave a verse, Sarva Dharman Prityaja, Mame Kam Sharanam Vraja, Ham Tvam Sar. And he rejected it as the ultimate verse. Ehobaya, why? Because it's dealing about giving up, renunciation. And renunciation is external to the soul. The soul is dedication, the soul is love. So it's a beautiful concept, but he wanted something higher. And he kept on going and going. And then he described this verse. It finally culminated in this verse where Radha and Krishna's hearts are so melted in love that they're not even cognizant of their self. That's how much they are absorbed. And when you gave the nice definition of avesh, I know Jai Jagannath likes to use the word avesh, which is absorption. And you gave a literal meaning that indicated even a higher degree of absorption, which is called possessed. Just completely, not just absorbed, overwhelmed. So that's the goal. And in one sense, if there is a God, why shouldn't absorption in love be the ultimate reality? And why shouldn't that objective be what ultimately we want to enter in one sense? Understanding also by our philosophy that love is the essence. Love, universal love, love of Krishna is the essence of the Ladini Shakti, the pleasure potency. And we're seeking that happiness. So it's absorption. And then in this story, where this Uddhava, this special person, is going to deliver this message to the gopīs, he sees that level of absorption. He sees this high level of absorption in Srimati Radharani. She is possessed. She is possessed to such a degree that even when Krishna is not there, she is seeing Krishna. So the relevance to us is that's the goal. It's also the practice. The practice is absorption. And bhakti sanjayate bhakti. When you become absorbed in love, it increases love. And that's our practice, to be absorbed. So these stories indicate that, and they give us our, and it's so important to have a prayojana or a goal, because all practices are dependent on your goal. And our prayojana is not just understanding God, but actually feeling God. And feeling God is feeling our relationship with God. Like a child, the goal of the child, the relationship with the mother, is not just to understand, oh, yes, I'm getting milk. She loves me. This must be my mother. It's the feeling of motherhood. So we have a fundamental, it's so important to have a philosophical basis of Krishna consciousness. We should understand the goal. When we have that understanding, then we'll also have that feeling, that deep feeling, which is pretty, which Sundar Gopal, you also said is friendship, but it's love, that feeling. And you know, and when I heard, and it may have been Srila Dhanurdhara, for all I know, but when he gave that simple understanding of prema as an energy between two people in relationship, and that's what we're trying to experience. That's really what we want. That's why we want a relationship with the holy name. What does that mean? A feeling of love. That's our goal. That's our prayojana. And it's very, very interesting when the Bhagavatam is summarized by Lord Brahma at the beginning of creation. And he summarizes what is our philosophy in three categories that all philosophical systems fit under. There must be a conception of reality and a valid means to know it's true. And there must be a means of realizing that reality. That's called abhidaya again. And there must be a description of the goal of doing so. Any philosophy can be divided in those categories. When those categories are described by Krishna to Lord Brahma at the beginning of creation, he describes first the description of reality, which is Krishna and Krishna's energies. But he doesn't describe the means to realize it. He describes the goal next. And then he describes the means, because you have to have an objective. So prayojana is important. And what is that prayojana that's described? The prayojana that's described, what prema bhakti is described, is a complete absorption and seeing Krishna inside and outside of everywhere. That's the ultimate reality. So, and in one sense, the retreat is organized like that in a sense, because we are connecting the prayojana to the abhidaya. We want to practice. We want determination to achieve a goal, but we have to have some goal. And how do we have that goal? We have to have some experience of it. We have to have some experience of that goal. And therefore, I said at the very beginning, and I think proudly I can say that I think our objectives are achieved, that the goal of the retreat is faith. And we describe that as trust by experience. Faith is our goal. And our goal is to have that prema, to have that. So you have to have some experience of it. And that's called shraddha. It all begins with a drop of that. That lets you know, I appreciate that this is good. And then as we describe, Rupa Goswami describes as the prema, the experience of that seed of prema grows, our objectives become, we increase our objectives from it's so good I want to be with the people, it's so good I want to make I want to practice, have the practices to achieve it, it's so good I want to give up those things that have no value to it, it's so good that I want to do it all the time and be fixed. It's so good that I'm actually getting a taste for it. The practices, it's so good, I'm addicted to the objective. Then it's so good that my heart completely melts. And then it's so good that there's nothing else in the consciousness. So this is about giving a faith, this experience, making it our goal. So I think in that sense, the retreat has been, from the feedback I get, I think it's been successful. I think we've gotten that experience. And how did we get that experience? By evasion, by absorption. In the morning, chanting japa, coming to class in the evening, associating with devotees, and we get that experience. Our heart begins to have those feelings with that realization. This is good. Look at all the things we work for when we have faith in a goal. So we have to get that faith in the goal. And that's the purpose of the retreat. Now we'll go and finish our last story. So now Krishna's saying who I'm giving this message to. And I want you to note the words. You don't have to be a Sanskrit scholar, but as you read the Bhagavatam, the words, I would say, have a certain flavor of love. That just repeating them, they touch your heart. So how's Krishna describing the gopis? Mat-manaskā. Their minds, man-manaskā, mat. Their minds in me. And prāṇā. Their lives are fixed in me. Just like in the Bhagavad Gita, when Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur he analyzes one of the main verses in the Bhagavad Gita, which describes a Vaishnava society, mat-chitta, mat-gatāḥ, prāṇā, bodhyantas parasparam, bodhyas parasparam, exchanging. A devotee is what? Mat-chitta, his mind. Krishna is his mind. Mat-gatāḥ, his goal. Mat-chitta, mat-gatāḥ, prāṇā, his life. And in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said it's like food. It's his food. It's what he lives for. And I think when we come to these retreats, that becomes a reality. When you begin to taste what bhakti feels like, the experience. I remember when I went to the Kumbh Mela 40 years ago or something, and it was such an experience, bathing in the Triveni, and it was very cold in the morning, and I get up, and I just have my blanket wrapped around me, and I go, and it's freezing, you go, and then you go, and then there was Mangal Artik. And I felt in that Mangal Artik, I felt like a cow from Vrindavan. And what's a cow from Vrindavan? That when they hear, you explaining this, when they hear Krishna's flute, and what is Krishna's flute? Krishna's flute is amplifying their love, just like what is kirtan. When the bhava in the heart is expressed by the discipline of music, that's kirtan. Without the bhava in the heart, there's not kirtan. And that comes, Krishna's flute is when the bhava in his heart is expressed by the discipline of music to such a way that sound is his love, and it's his love for the devotees. So when Krishna blows his flute, and if you're in Krishna's pastimes, what you may hear is, just put your name, I love you. You'll hear that in your ear from Krishna. So when you're doing kirtan, you're hearing Krishna's flute, and the response is kirtan. The cowboys, when Krishna's taking the cows to the forest, they have drums. They find these shiny leaves off of the tree and they roll them up and they can play them as trumpets. And they're doing kirtan, but they're hearing, each one is hearing Krishna saying, I love you. And the cows are hearing that too. That's what the spiritual world is like. It's that relationship you always wanted that's perfect. It's that perfect relationship with this perfect reciprocation. And you hear sincerely from the person. It's not like, I gave my whole life to you, this is all. It's no. You hear from that person who you have that ultimate love and attraction for. You hear constantly with that flute his affirmation of that relationship. And the cows also. So their ears, it's such nectar, or as they say in my local vernacular, nectar. It's such nectar. It's such nectar that their ears go up because they're just afraid it's going to like overpour. They don't want it to. So I remember we have these experiences in spiritual life. I remember this, and after bathing in the Triveni and going to Mangal Artik, and one of the great ISKCON Kirtaniers was singing. And I actually tilted my head to the side because I felt it was Goloka, Premadhan, Harinam, Sankirtan. I felt it was coming from the spiritual world. So Krishna is talking about his devotees. And he said, mat-arthe, for my sake. Artha means value, not for you, but for my value, Krishna says. What are you doing for my value? Then tyakta-daihikāḥ, you gave up everything for me. You gave up everything for me alone. And therefore, dayitaṁ preṣṭham. Preṣṭham means the dearmost, dayitaṁ, the dayitaṁ preṣṭham, the dearmost dayitaṁ. Preṣṭham, the dearmost dayitaṁ, beloved. You're the dear, for me now, you are the dearmost beloved because of that. And I personally sustain such devotees. So he goes, and it's just, and he said they're overwhelmed by this separation of remembering me, and therefore you give this message. So now he knows the mission, and he knows the consciousness of the people, that he somehow has to deliver this very difficult message that I'm not coming right now. And he knows they're only living on the thread and hope of his promise that he said, I will return. Because when they followed him out, actually, Lord Chaitanya, if you look in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we know the story is that God wanted to experience, to become complete. He wanted to experience the topmost love of his topmost devotee at the height of her love. So there's certain pastimes, and one of the pastimes is when Akrura took the residents of Vrindavan, took Krishna from Vrindavan, and the gopīs were following until they just stood stunned. They had no life. Their life, this is their mood. Krishna is my life. Without Krishna, I have no life. What is it? Sunyam, dukkha, sunyam, dukkha, taptam. Dukkha means suffering and taptam means burning. You put them together, it means tormented. They were tormented in separation. So now he has this message and he goes to Vrindavan and he has two missions. Please my parents and relieve the separation of the gopīs. So when he comes, and Uddhava is the topmost devotee, and he comes and he's very beautiful and he looks like Krishna and he's dressed in Krishna's garments. And as you mentioned, the consciousness can sometimes change color. You can become red with rage, green with envy, blue with depression, pale with fright. Lord Chaitanya also. It's Krishna in the mood of Radha, the color changes. So Uddhava, his color changed. He became Krishna's color. And he happened to be Krishna's cousin because his father's was the brother of Vasudeva. So he has that, and he comes, and Nanda Maharaj sees him, and of course there's culture. They greet him. People massaged his feet. They offered him some food. Culture. Not even a great person. But in Sanskrit, the word for guest is Atiti Bhagavan. The guest is God. It's such a nice culture. Just to prevent that consciousness we're talking about, material consciousness. I am the center, and that can happen. I am the center, and this is my house, and this is my eternal residence. These are my eternal associates. It's so, material life is just so much putting one in that consciousness in a proper culture. Very important thing is how you treat guests. Takes you out of that consciousness, how you deal with money. That's why yesterday was so nice. Charity. Charity is, if there's two things for a grihasta specifically to become pure, it's charity and responsibility. We're embodied. You know, I explain, I'm writing, I was finishing my Monday morning greetings I was writing about the false ego, and what the false ego is at the time of your last life, Krishna, through his energies, analyzes what you need next. He sees your desires, he sees your past deeds, and then decides what you need next. And it's another body. And how do you identify with the body? There's this element called ahankara. And if you look at it, it's almost like a funnel that delimits the consciousness to the particular body you have, to identify with that. So it's so easy to fortify that conception as you're in house, as you're in family, as your guru, as your Maharaj. So many things, everything's fortifying that conception. So proper culture gives you different tools to prevent you from sinking deep into the consciousness that embodies you into karma. And one of the ways is charity. You earn money, but you give some of the fruits to God. And by giving the fruits to God, you start to see things as gods. What is Maya? Maya is the illusion that something's separate from God. So what you do by taking the fruits that you get and giving things to God, this is karma yoga, you start seeing things as God. You start becoming out of illusion. And in Titi Bhagavan, the guest is God. The guest is God. So it's not just Uddhava, but especially Uddhava. And then they begin to inquire from him. And Nanda Maharaj begins to explain to Uddhava about Krishna and how he killed all these different demons. And what he's actually saying is, he's killed all these different demons. So why is he killing us? By not being present before us. And then Mother Yasoda, it's so unusual because they have this culture of a Titi Bhagavan, especially the woman of the house. It represents that. And she doesn't say anything because she actually hasn't talked to anyone since Krishna left. She hasn't seen anything since Krishna left. Hundreds and hundreds of people were trying to pacify her. They had absolutely no success. She practically couldn't see something because the tears from her eyes were just constantly coming. So she couldn't even see Uddhava. She couldn't even look at Uddhava. And then Uddhava starts to try to pacify Nanda Maharaj. And then he looks at him and he sees, my God, Krishna left so long ago. And what is the level of his devotion? And he's still feeling it as acutely as it was tomorrow. As yesterday, he's still in that absolute abject feelings of separation. Completely. And then he looks around and he sees, wow, it looks like these cobwebs have been there forever. And look at all those pots. They still haven't been washed. This is so unusual. Look at his separation. And Uddhava was what? He was dayitaṁ, dayitaṁ, the most beloved friend of Krishna. I'm the most beloved friend of Krishna. I've left Krishna. I mean, I'm feeling separation. I have his order. But this is after so many years, doesn't it? The separation becomes pacified somewhat over the year. But he looks at Nanda Maharaj and says, you're such a devotee. I'm not a devotee. And Nanda Maharaj says, you think that I'm a devotee? You're like a foolish child. You're calling me a devotee. Dasarath is a devotee. Because when Ram left, Dasarath died. I'm still living. I'm not a devotee. How can you call me a devotee? Of course, this was the emotion of experiencing death, wanting death, but loving Krishna so much that it would be too painful for him if he heard about this. And then what happened is he kept on explaining. And then he became very philosophical because sometimes to pacify a deep emotional state, you got to give someone some perspective. So he tried to give him some perspective, some philosophical perspective. But the reason he gave him a philosophical perspective was very interesting, because he felt that this intimate love, it's called vipralambha. Vipralambha really is only in Vrindavan. It's the separation from intimate love. You may love a master and your master dies. But if your son dies, if your lover dies, parents die. So it's the separation from intimate love. And he thought that type of separation was going to kill him. So he said, let me bring some aishvarya, some sense of God's position here. Because that love he may be able to survive. But the love that Krishna is my son, in separation, that'll kill him. So he starts trying to pacify him by philosophy. Krishna is the supreme Lord. And then what happens is, all of a sudden it's dawn. And what happens in dawn? All of a sudden you start hearing these ankle bells in Braj. Because it's even in the poorest villages, people keep their wealth in silver, and they have bangles on their feet. Even the village ladies, they have bangles on their feet, like silver. And what to speak of the opulence. And what are they doing in the morning? Because it's gopīs, they're churning the butter. I used to have this place in Vrindavan that I would bring people with, where they would churn the yogurt into butter. It was like, it's so, and you watch it, all of a sudden you're waiting, when is it going to turn? And all of a sudden it starts to become golden. And then it would be separated, and then they would take out the buttermilk and they would put a lemon in and they put some sugar. And then they give you the ghee. Brijbasis are amazing. I had a friend who was doing a land deal for crores of rupees with a Brijbasi in Govardhan. And the final part of the deal is he had to go to his house. And they took a scoop of butter and put it on his plate and put sugar on it. He wouldn't complete the deal unless he proved his Brijbasi credentials, his devotional credentials. You have to eat butter. So he did. So they're churning with the bangles, and you hear and then what are they doing also? Immediately they begin to sing songs about Krishna. So all over Braj. What I remember I was going every morning around Braj early in the morning. And the real beauty of it is early in the morning, because how does Vrindavan wake up? They wake up to the smell of incense. All of a sudden, people are worshiping to bells, to kirtans. That's a real spiritual city waking up. It's so beautiful. Even to this day, once it starts and the people who get up later, they may do other things. But at the Mangal Artik, the bells, the incense, the kirtan. So they begin to hear the kirtan, and he realizes it's dawn. And then they look outside, and the Brijbasi ladies, they see a beautiful golden chariot. They say, oh no, I know whose chariot this is. This is Krura. This is Krura, who took Krishna from Vrindavan. And you know what he's doing here? He's killing us so he can use our flesh for the fire of burning Kamsa, his master. He wants to take our flesh. He wants to kill us again. He killed us once. He wants to kill us again and take our flesh and add it to the oblations of the fire of his master, that rascal. So then they see Uddhava. And he looks just like Krishna. And he has the garments of Krishna. And he looks like Krishna. And they take him to a secluded place. And then Uddhava sees. They just start talking about Krishna with such devotion and such love. And then they're talking like this, and they're explaining it and remembering Krishna. Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. It's all in the consciousness. And the bhava in the heart is expressed by the discipline of music. So when you have bhava, there's kirtan, and he's listening to these gopīs singing. Yasomati Nandana Brajabara Nagara Gokula Ranjana Kana Gopi Paranadana Matana Manahara Kaliya Damadavidana Amala Harinama. And he's hearing this kirtan of the gopīs. And he's stunned because what kirtan does, it takes that bhava and it makes it in sound so that when it enters into the heart of another person, then you get to experience their heart. So he starts to experience the heart of the gopīs. He sees what their heart is by their kirtan. And we can see that. We like the kirtans. We had nice kirtans last night. Sundar Gopal was saying, wow, 60 people, all open-hearted. They're just chanting with their hearts because there was bhava. That's what happens when bhava is expressed and there's the discipline of music. Then people share the heart of the person who's singing. It's a very special experience for people because they've never heard anything like that. It's not just music. It's like King Prataparudra. He wanted this, the Vaishnavas were coming from Bengal, and there's a place they enter into Puri, and he's on the roof with his brother-in-law. And so he's on the roof with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, the chief scholar, and his brother-in-law, who's Lord Chaitanya's devotee, Gopinath Acharya. And they're looking. And if you know the history of Bengal, etc., there's thousands of kirtan groups, and you can't imagine how talented they are. I was with our friend Javi. We were in the Govardhan place, and there was a professional kirtan group, like in the distance. And he was like, what? He was the music, the talent, you can't even imagine. And the dance, how they dance together, and they all have their golden dhotis, and they're so talented. So there's so many kirtan groups. But Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya listened to Srila Dhanurdhara sing. The four great singers of Gaur Leela, at least by the Rathayatra, are Srila Dhanurdhara, Srivas Thakur, Mukunda, and Govinda Ghosh. He's listening to their singing. He says, what is that? I've never heard it before. He heard melody. He heard rhythm. But he never heard the bhav. So when he's hearing, when Uddhava is hearing the bhav, the gopīs just start spontaneously singing about Krishna. He's never heard anything like this before. And then all of a sudden he looks over, and then there's this one gopī, Kechit, one special gopī, and she's talking to a bumblebee. Completely mad. Because the bumblebee somehow has some kind of whiskers and there's a little color on it. And it's, oh, bumblebee, we know about you. This garland, when Krishna embraced the ladies of Mathura, then the saffron musk was on the garland. Now it's on your whiskers and you're coming here. You are the unreliable servant of an unreliable master. And then Uddhava was gone like, man, This is like, because he was Sakshad, he was Sisha's Brihaspati, the direct disciple of Brihaspati. And because he had that experience of their singing, and he had this philosophical knowledge, understand this is not just ordinary madness. Normally, this is divyan, this is divine madness when you're overcome with the highest levels of love. I've never seen anything like this. This type of love is exhibited, it's never exhibited. And then she goes on and on as the disappointed lover of Krishna in one jalpa prati jalpa, nonsense talk with them. And then after that, Uddhava said, I thought I was a devotee. I thought I was a devotee, but when I saw the love of the gopis, my pride as a devotee was crushed to dust. And then he begins to pray that what I've seen in devotion is so exalted that it would be my greatest privilege if I was a little bush, grass, herb in Vrindavan, so that the dust of these feet of these gopis is on my head. That's what it means when they say padasevana, worship the feet. It means humble service. Why? Because the feet is the one part of the body that's the dirtiest. You can allow your feet to step in something. Don't sit in it. And don't put your face in it. But your feet. So when you say I worship the feet, what you're saying is so exalted. The lowest part is the highest for me. I just want to worship this. And I'll get the mercy of just a few drops and some dust of this. Not even the feet, something that touched this. And it's not exaggeration because it's Krishna and it's Krishna's devotion and it's the supreme devotion. And then he stays with them and he just begins to speak Krishna-katha because he's supremely intelligent and he has devotion and he's this disciple of Brihaspati and he's learned and he was with Krishna and then he's going around Vrindavan and they're showing him all the places and then he goes back and he explains to Krishna, oh, I forgot, what was his message? His message that pacified them is that I am there in my Baba. We are not separated from God by a physical distance. We are separated from God by consciousness. And what is that consciousness? Faith. We are separated from God only by our faith. It's not physical distance, it's consciousness. So because you have that consciousness, you're never separated from me. And in fact, I left because that which was before the eyes can be far away, but that which is far away can be in your heart. I've left to come in your heart even deeper. There's no physical distance from God. It's simply consciousness. And then Uddhava comes back and he just says, and therefore, look how expert it was who Krishna chose. You know, it's like food. You know, if someone like me says, it's a great prep, Prabhu, you don't know how good the prep is. I'll eat anything. Put sugar in it, milk, I'm okay. But a connoisseur, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, the gourmet guru, he was so particular. He had that cook, and you love his calzones. Gopal. He was trained by Tamal Krishna Maharaj. This is how he was trained. When they served dokla, it had to be taken out of the oven 3 seconds before it was fully cooked. And then it would come in the air and come on the plate. And he put his finger on it. So someone like that says, it's a great prep. And I had one time, I had a cook in Vrindavan, a Bengali cook used to work for me. He made on Ekadasi sweet rice. And he made the grains out of potatoes fried in ghee. He was such a cook that we had a feast, and Bhakti True was there, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj and all these connoisseurs. And we're having Narottam Das Thakur bhajans, and my cook came out, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj looked up. He said, I knew one day we would be experiencing the ecstasy of Chaitanya Charitamrita, but I never expected so soon.
Wow.
So the fact that Uddhava, who he was, and what is Krishna's desire? Again, the mind of God. And what is the mind of God? He wants to glorify his devotees. So this is our philosophy. And it's trying to inspire us to read the Bhagavatam and develop relationships and get some sambandha and understand the jewels that we have. Oh, wonderful. Jai, it's 8:15. You want to lead some kirtan, or maybe go a few minutes over? You have some, we'd like some, you have any comment you'd like to make? It'd be nice. Yeah, come on.
Some years ago when I was here.
Come here. You can look into the. What's so funny? What? What's that? Oh, you're not feeling good.
No, I'm okay.
Oh no, he loves it.
What?
He loves it.
Once a few years ago, I was here in Kali, and we were describing, prema, and Mahaprabhu's prema, and Gopi she raised her hand at the end of my class and was like, whenever I hear you talk about prema and Mahaprabhu's prema, I become frightened. You remember that?
I become what?
I become frightened.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem so desirable. And we all had a good laugh about that because the goal of life is scary. And so hearing about the resonance of Vrindavan and their separation from Krishna, what it's doing to them, just like from conventional awareness, doesn't strike one, prima facie, doesn't strike one as something exactly desirable. It seems a little bit scary. So I guess my question, I have a question to that. How does one really access the depth and the meaning and also really the beauty of this sort of devotion and separation, like this viraha bhakti? How does one access its beauty and its meaning in a way that you really want to embrace it? And it's not just like something you kind of hear about, but you're like, that's not really for me. Yeah, I'll never forget that when Gopi was like, she was like, no, we're not about that life.
Every time I speak the 10th canto, Jai Jagannath asks a similar question. The 10th canto, there are 9 other cantos. And in those 9 other cantos, it purifies the heart and purifies the intelligence. If the heart is not purified, we tend to see things as mundane. And And if the intelligence is not purified, we tend to see things as fantastic, as mythology. So our philosophy is to listen to things systematically and come to that point. 90% of Shastra is sambandha, a philosophical understanding of reality. And the example that is given is, if you're looking for a treasure, there's three things. Where is the treasure? How do I access it? And what is its value? The most important thing is, where's the treasure? That's sambandha. That's called Siddha Pradesh. Siddha Pradesh means instructions that lead to perfection. Saying that, most of our teachings are by far sambandha. And therefore, when I'm saying ever personally, but I think there also has to be some prayojana to give inspiration. And how is it relevant? I think it touches people's hearts. I saw when Srila Gopal was explaining the different pastimes, after explaining a day of Vedanta and then going to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Canto, I think it touches people's hearts. I think they have some flavor for it because there is some attraction for it. But it's very careful. The speaker has to make sure it's in the proper context. Generally, when I speak 10th canto, I start with talking about the qualification for it. I talk about the qualification for it. And at a point, in speaking about the qualification, then I feel following Prabhupada and giving the necessary background, then I become empowered to speak a little bit about the pastimes. And Prabhupada also gave Krishna book, and we try to follow the way Prabhupada gave Krishna book, couched in a philosophical understanding. So I would say I'm a communicator, so I try to put it in context, and I see when people have flavor for it. But I can also see, even in your personal life, you told me you have a mentor, for prayer, right? And what is his connection? His connection with this person who really made the effort to put that flavor and prayojana and that flavor into the thing, because you always want, like, where's the taste? Where's the taste? Where's the flavor? It's relationship. So you have to hear about your beloved. So we're also following Lord Shade. So I can appreciate it, but I think this is not an outside audience. This is an audience that's been here together. They've been in a japa period for half hour. They're hearing philosophical content. And I think that couched in the right way, something will stick. There's a famous story that because Srila Gopal's here, I like to speak about Srila Dhanurdhara Swami's guru. And they told the story. There was one person in the Gaudiya Math called Narahari, and he was called the mother of the Gaudiya Math. They honored him as the highest level. He would just take care of all the sick people. So one day, someone got very, very sick. Very, very, very sick. And he had this killer diarrhea and it wouldn't stop. So they sent him with Nahari to this doctor. And the doctor gave him a medicine with ghee. And then when he got cured, and they said, well, how did he get cured? Because she gave him something with ghee. And they said, well, something stuck, even though so much came out. So I think I think it's also like that, that when you present Krishna-katha and the beauty of Krishna's pastimes, I think something will stick of Krishna's beauty, and just repeating the Sanskrit words, Saka, Dayitaṁ, Krishnasya, the friend, the beloved friend of Krishna. I think that touches people's hearts. Anyway, this is a long discussion more, but Are you up to doing some kirtan? You can do a little. Okay. I tried my best, Jai, to answer your question. Okay. Srila Prabhupada.